Okay, just welcome everyone to the April 4th Planning Board meeting. And I'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Delicio?
Here.
Ms. Foley, as I said, won't be joining us tonight. Ms. Creighton?
Here.
Mr. Gilbert?
Here.
Mr. Olney?
Here.
And Ms. Tenney?
Here.
Okay, so we're 6 out of 7. And I just want to let everyone know that this meeting's being recorded, and to make any inquiries to go through the chair as we go through this. At this point, I will turn the proceedings over to our vice chair, Sarah Creighton, to proceed with the meeting. I will share the agenda.
Thanks, Ron. I think actually we're gonna have other things to share, so maybe we'll
Okay, I can stop.
yeah.
Let me give you capabilities to share. Will you be sharing?
Yep, I think we probably will be. Hopefully we can talk through some of these things as well. I just want to do a couple things. One is the minutes. Unfortunately, Sue, we still don't have them going into the meeting folders. I was able to track them down in the document folder. So they're in the root folder. So nobody had a chance to look at them, unfortunately. So I did copy.
I found them. Am I muted? I looked at the first one, 2-8. They looked fine. I didn't know if Sarah, if you looked at them at least.
I was on the road all day today, and they weren't there on the weekend, and I didn't try to track them down. So
no problem.
But if I have other people looked at them they were in the root folder that as in the, anybody want? Laura has.
I looked at a few, the ones that I could find by going back in the various planning board meeting folders. So a few from February I was able to find and look at. I have one correction.
Yeah. Maybe you can send the corrections to Sharon. Rana, I think we probably have to defer again, unfortunately. We're going to probably need a meeting just to go over minutes. But anyway.
I did want to talk to you, Sue, on the posting of minutes. There have been no minutes posted this entire year on the site, so we need to figure out what's going on.
Each time I ask, she says they're posted, that she's given them to the clerk. So I don't know where the disconnect is.
You can check with the clerk.
Yeah. And she had said that some in January 24th were approved. I couldn't, and then she sent me those minutes and they were riffed with errors. So I'm guessing maybe she didn't send me the ones that were approved. So if anyone has the 124 minutes to make sure.
We did approve them with the corrections that I went through, and I gave her a handwritten copy of the corrections, and I have a PDF of that. And I know you asked me for it, I don't know it straight. But before, Mark Bobrowski is with us and he has to leave at 8. So maybe if we need more minutes, we can take him up the end. I do want to say two other things though. Just if anybody is watching this after the fact, there were some complaints that we were overlapping with the Board of Selectmen, which we did talk about last meeting. But if anybody's tuning in, we're not talking about the transit-oriented development or any of those issues. We're just simply, this is a working session to go over zoning changes. We encourage you to watch through this very exciting topic till the end, but it's not about the transit-oriented development, which I think some people thought we were going to be talking about tonight. The other thing is that in terms of LCD updates, I think the only update is that the Finance Committee did, we understand, vote to recommend approval of the LCD changes at their last meeting. So that's good news, I think. So with, we sent Mark a bunch of I think we sent him 10 documents that basically represent where we are And we asked him to check through documents that I don't think we need to get comments from you, Mark, unless there is something egregious. I think we'd like, any administrative comments, but if there's anything outrageous in the sections that we sent you, which were that we've already moved, we think are ready to move to town meeting. And those are non-conforming use, section 12 administration, and sections 1 through 4, which we're actually going to talk about for tonight. So are there any issues there that are not, clerical kinds of things, but that we've made mistakes on? I think we've reflected your comments, but
I did not get anything for review in that ilk. I got section 6, which is very long, and the residential cluster provision, which I did take a look at. So I'll have to look. That was the non-conforming section, admin, which is section 10 or 11.
Yep. Did you get a
sections
memo
1
from
through
me?
4.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we'll,
No, I think it bounced. I think if I remember right, Sue said your email bounced to me.
okay. Well, so I wasn't really planning on taking much time on that, but if you have any comments that just, things we missed in those sections 1 through 3, section 12, the administration section, and the non-conforming use section, we think those are pretty ready to go.
Okay, I will look at those and get something to Sue by Wednesday.
Okay, great, fabulous. So we're going to take things a little out of order because Mark has to leave at 8. We're going to start with the actually the section 6 rewrite that Chris put together and Laura made some significant comments on. And Chris, why don't you just refresh us as to what you were trying to do? And I think what we want to do right now is keep this as a high level discussion rather than the details. And I have some ideas about how we get the details ironed out.
Okay, so I'm not going to talk about parking because that's part of section 6 and it's pretty straightforward. What I was trying to do was to consolidate all of the site plan review and special permit performance standards into a single thing that we could refer to whenever we were going to be doing a site plan review or a special permit. We could also use it as a handout to our prospective developers so the developers could see what performance standards we were trying to abide to. And that's really all I did. And then Laura went through and made all kinds of wonderful comments on performance standards that we should be thinking about for environmental sustainability and other things. So I just put those comments in there. So basically there are two things. One is sort of a formatting thing, and the other is some specific additions that Laura suggested. That's the high level.
Okay, great. And in Laura made some substantive comments that change or strengthen the performance standards, but in the work that you did, Chris, did you change any of the content in any meaningful way, or did you just kind of try to make it readable?
No, I was cutting and pasting essentially.
Okay, great. So Mark, what do you have comments on that draft at a high level?
No, I see all of the comments that have been made, and I had no objection to any of the comments. I mean, one can disagree about the safety of allowing vehicles to back out onto roads, but I understand the point. It does take more pavement in order to keep that from happening. So essentially, I had nothing in the way of substantive objection to the comments that have been made. I would point out that since we last met, Medford has adopted its ordinance on draft 11 that I prepared for them a couple of weeks ago. And the Medford staff includes a traffic engineer, and he went through the performance standards for traffic, which I had given them pretty much the same as I had given you. And he made some substantive comments and updated sources and things of that sort. So if you like, I can send you his comments, and you might want to take a look at a traffic engineer's thinking most recently on what constitutes something suitable for Medford. And I
Yeah,
I
that'd
don't
be
think,
great.
yeah, no problem at all. I'll do that. I'll send that to Sue when we're done with the meeting tonight.
There was one other thing I meant to say at the beginning of this, which I think we should be thinking about as we go through all of these changes, which is we can't let the good be the enemy, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And what we're doing is so much better than what exists. I don't think we should get hung up too much on trying to make it perfect, because it's probably a fool's errand.
So we did put a draft of the section 6 up, and the only comment that was posted, Mark, just so we know, each of our sections, we have a comment folder, comment file, and the only comment that was there was somebody asked if we had defined hazardous waste, and we did do that in our definitions. We spent quite a bit of time on that, so I'm not sure where that comment came from, but and I answered it in the comment document. So that's the only comment the board has made so far. So do we like the idea of consolidating our section 6 and trying to tidy it up and passing it kind of as a wholesale new section 6? That's sort of the way we're headed. If you recall that after we did the renumbering, there was significant blank sections because we renumbered a whole bunch of things and they moved out of section 6. So at the very least, cleaning it up from that perspective is a big help. So I think that's the high level question. Gary, you have your hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
I'm at a different location and the internet's not good. I looked through this and I don't recall seeing something about the backing, that one issue, the backing into the roadway. Has that been removed or is that still in there?
It's comment LT2.
Sarah, is it possible to put the
Yep.
text of what we're talking about on the screen instead of people's photos so I could?
Yep, sure. I'm looking
follow
for
up?
it now.
But I thought we had decided to remove that onerous requirement that none of the driveways in the town can allow cars to back onto the roadway because it's not just asphalt, but it can be expensive for some people.
Yep, hold on.
It's a state law for state roadways only.
We do have some state highways in town, so how do we change this and then still comply with state law? It can't conflict.
Can I respond to that? Well, the answer it's simple. The state law exists for the state highways that are in town, and it doesn't apply to any other roads.
Well, it's not that simple. If someone doesn't realize and they're building something and they come to us at the last minute and we're the last on the agenda, which is normal. So, and I think onerous is an example, an adjective that you have used, Gary, but does anyone know why it was put in there, when it was put in there, and what the previous people thought? I mean, I think it's one idea, it's our idea right now going forward that this should be taken out, but what is the rationale? Pavement and onerous versus safety? Is that what we're saying?
So Laura, your comment was that we not why don't you explain what your comment was?
Yeah, it's for a few reasons. One is in the smaller lot, denser parts of the sort of historic settlement, needing to drive forward out of a driveway would increase driveway area. It's just constrained from particularly the D and G zones, it's quite constrained in terms of the site area that you have to do that. It does increase paving and impervious surface coverage. And there is good traffic engineering data that says that backing out into a road, a slow road, we're not talking highways, can actually be a traffic calming device, can slow things. So just wanting to preserve that historic settlement pattern and not expand our paved footprint beyond necessary.
I think in those districts, a lot of the settlement has already been completed, and maybe it would slow an automobile coming down, but you're not going to see a bicycle. I think that's the difference. I mean, and I think we need to go back to why were these put in here? And I think we need to have a better answer than pavement to take it out.
Our zoning laws were often created in the 1970s in a very car-focused time. And so much of what towns are trying to do is to rewrite that environmental damage that was caused by very car-oriented zoning regulations. And so this is one of those things that is a holdover from that time and is not necessary for safety given local roads. We have development all over town where people are backing out of their driveway safely.
So just to clarify this, the current zoning has this as a prohibition for greater than 2 family dwellings. So it's not every, at least in the current zoning. I want to try to keep this section 6 fairly high level. So without, Gary, one more comment on that, and then let's try to move on to some of these other issues.
Well, I'll define the word onerous because I saw it because I administered it before in the past. And a good example is the first house, I think they're a Russian family, built a home on Spy Rock Hill, and they had to spend thousands of dollars in retaining walls just to get this T-shaped hammerhead turnaround, which I think it's pretty clear to me and a lot of people in town that that's an onerous requirement. Yes, it has some safety issues, but doesn't warrant forcing every single residence in town to do it. So that's why I'm saying it. I'm glad it's being removed.
I think there's a compromise that can be done here, but we're not going to come up with it right now. So let's.
Yeah, Christine, do you have something new to add to this?
Well, I think what you're saying, Gary, is this was exempt except for 1 and 2 families, right? So we're saying I have a problem with this. Taking this out, we're talking about increasing our population in town, and backing out, I think, is dangerous, especially around the heater. I do.
Okay. So, so I think we have a difference of opinion on that. I'm not sure we're going to settle it right now. It might be interesting to see what Medford's traffic engineer came up with. Let's go through. So some changes in proposed dimensional requirements. And I think what we need to do is also just go through the comments and try to get some agreement as we go forward. Laura, you made some comments. So what we have here is a reorganized base, and Laura has gone through and made some comments. So maybe we can just go through a few those and just hear the rationale and not try to.
Yeah, much of this was for clarity, Sarah. Things were kind of sprinkled through the different sections, which I think was not in the material that Mark provided, but left over from our previous version. And so, and it was sometimes conflicting in terms of, where planting was required, say. So I did sort of clean some of that up. It looks like I added a provision for bicycle parking where we had not mentioned it before.
Yeah.
Again, recognizing sort of alternative modes of transit.
And I think we left the sign bylaw in all its glory in its current state, recognizing that we probably need to change that at some point. And then the question here about performance standards for special permits and site plan review. And Laura asks why excludes residential use. So would
Right, so I
agree.
didn't make any changes there, but I asked the question, should we exclude residential use? Should we exempt our municipal uses? No, I don't know if that might be a Dover requirement there about the exemption of municipal uses and structures, but if we're trying to,
No.
no, it's not, okay.
Well, I think I'm trying to, let me go back and look
Yeah.
at my original draft of this section. But the purpose of this is to focus on non-residential, with the exception of larger multifamilies
Mhm.
and commercial proposals that require site plan approval or special permit. So it wouldn't include anything to do with single family. It would, if you wanted to define large multifamily as 6 units or more, it would include that.
So we define elsewhere in section 4, what things require special permit and site plan review. And then I think the idea is that when you check that box, then it comes here to this section.
Let me just grab my draft off of my computer.
And I
I
guess
think
yeah.
we've made some fairly significant changes to your draft. At this
Yeah,
point.
I can appreciate that. I just want to see what I did so I don't go crazy. That's all.
So the other thing we're coming up against, I'm just going to keep scrolling through here. It looks like we've just cut and pasted and organized some material, and maybe with a few exceptions, and we come down to outdoor lighting standards.
Yeah, I made a lot of comments on lighting.
Yep, and I'm happy to look through those. The searchlight issue. The one question you asked was, why do we allow laser show searchlights? Or why do we?
For advertising, we prohibit them for
Advertising.
advertising.
Right. I don't know if that's
Do we allow them?
legacy. So I want to actually propose the larger question here. So Laura's made some good comments here. And then noise standards, and other kinds of things.
So just to go back, since I found it, just to go back to the special permit site plan review. So the original intent here was, and you can change it if you like, but the original intent was that if there was something other than a single or a 2-family or a multifamily with 5 or fewer units, it would not be subject to this. What would be subject to this would be the non-residential, i.e. commercial industrial uses, plus multifamily dwellings with 6 or more units. So it's the big stuff that gets subject to these performance standards. That's the way it was drafted originally.
Yeah, that's still the intent.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
I
wanna
think
be
I
clear.
was looking at a word that said non-residential, and I guess I was thinking of the larger development, so
Yeah.
it was clarification question.
Okay.
And Mark, does it make sense for it to apply to municipal projects if they are some of the larger projects in town?
I think it does. Municipal projects are not exempt unless the zoning provides a specific exemption for them. It's not Dover. So if you don't provide an exemption for municipal projects, they are subject to the regulations. And, that sounds fair to me, for example, on major DPW sites, yards, things of that sort. I would want a site plan review at a minimum if I was going to live next door to it.
I think we need to go back because I think we took that out.
So I don't think there needs to be any, if you look at 642 in the 3rd line, I don't think there needs to be a waiver for single family residences or multifamily properties of 6 units or less. You're not subjecting them to this, so they don't need a waiver.
Right.
At least my original intent was not to subject them to this.
And my comment didn't indicate that. It was just more open-ended about, do we catch larger residential?
Yeah. So to put it, you're saying you're going to give a waiver to things. I'm saying the applicability would be non-residential, meaning commercial industrial, or multifamily with 6 units or more.
Oh. Okay.
we define what a unit is?
That's
Oh,
what
yeah,
we
we do. Somewhere. Sorry, I'm gonna make you sick here for a second. Okay, so it seems to me, if I can summarize what I'm hearing is, thank you, Chris and Laura, for a good review of this and cleaning it up. That what we should do next, I'm gonna propose, is a track changes version of the cleaned up version that proposes that highlights some of the things that we may a few things that are substantive changes, rather than worrying too much about the ordering of things, and come back to us with where we can kind of hammer out how we feel about those substantive changes. The one thing my opinion, well, first of all, let me ask if that seems like a good next step.
It does to me, and one of the things is that the numbering of these sections are all screwed up because I was cutting and pasting them. And
yeah, we need to renumber it.
Yeah, that all has to be.
So I'm going to suggest that we renumber it and then use track changes for the language that changes, and not worry about trying to use track changes for the renumbering.
So is everybody okay with just taking Laura's changes and incorporating them as best we can?
I think we should use those that are substantive. We should track change and just get through them. I think there are a couple of them. The only thing that concerns me is anything that would be controversial, because I feel like it's such a opportunity to tidy up this section, and then, you know, in November or some other time, if we want to tackle signs or some of a few things that might be controversial, but I think most of them are not, as I look through it. So
the idea will be to have track changes with the crossouts and the proposed language in the same document, correct? Or will it all be?
Yeah,
for show. I mean, you know, to show public. I'm thinking about how we present this.
Well, we're not talking about the existing section 6. We're talking about changes to the proposed section 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't track change.
Right.
The existing would be impossible.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the problem we have with many of these sections. Okay, thank you on that. Let me jump to section. I'm actually going to, before I go to section, hold on, let me just make sure I save this with today's date. What's today's date? Somebody help me. April
4.
Thank you. So I want to actually I'm going to jump around a little bit to the moves to the general bylaw, because we took some of them out of section 4, which is why I thought it would make sense to do those next. Maybe Mark, as I'm pulling this up, you could help us understand which things belong in the general bylaw and which things belong in zoning. Just a high level discussion of that.
If I remember correctly, the things that we pulled out were the stormwater bylaw, which is usually adopted by communities as a general bylaw. There was also a provision that had to do with a moratorium based on sewer availability, but I think we just decided that we
deleted that. No, I guess
that.
my question is even higher level.
Oh.
What things belong, you know, what types of things belong in the general bylaw, and what types, and it seems like those are things, my understanding is things that apply to everybody and aren't related to getting a building permit or a subdivision approval.
Well,
Is that correct?
there's no hard and fast rule. There are cases, very few, but there are some cases in which municipalities have tried to adopt what would truly be zoning subject matter as a general bylaw. And the courts have looked at typically whether that's a subject matter regulated by zoning, what the intent of the town was. So that, for example, one of a community, Raynham, tried to ban the number of mobile home parks in town, and they passed a general bylaw limiting the number of mobile home parks to 6. And the court, they had always regulated mobile home parks in zoning before. And the court threw that out and said, that's a zoning bylaw. You have to adopt it as a zoning bylaw. If you look at it from the other direction, the things that municipalities typically carve out would be signs, stormwater, and generally things which you want to be prospective and retrospective. So remember that zoning only looks forward and general bylaws look back as well. So a general bylaw, real simple one, would be curb your dog. That's not just going to apply to new dogs, that's going to apply to old dogs too. And that's why you pretty much focus on the benefits of a general bylaw there.
Okay, that's helpful.
So signs, you will look both ways. If your sign is falling down, you don't want to say it's grandfathered, thus there's no problem. You want somebody to come into conformance. If your property is leaking, you don't want it to just, the stormwater bylaw to be effective only for new homes. You want it to get old homes as well.
Okay,
So Mark, how about parking?
Parking is typically a matter that's zoning related and is, I don't know of any town that doesn't, that regulates it as a general bylaw.
And how about parking a recreational vehicle in your side yard?
I suppose
Or
that
boat.
that kind of goes both ways. I mean, you could have a general bylaw that would say curb your dog.
okay,
I'd
so
read-
with that in mind and our effort to try to get some things into the general bylaws, Chris and I, or we have collectively, and then Chris and I as our drafters here, took a stab at this. And there are a couple of categories. First of all, when we just procedurally, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I think they need anything that moves to the general bylaws. We need
That's-
2 articles because
that's
you need to have
correct.
2/3 to remove it. And the general bylaws need a majority. So they have to be
Yep.
separate articles.
Yep.
So the first one is to delete the junk car section, which is 8.5, and put it someplace in I just said following section, blah, blah, to the general bylaws. And all I did here was to copy that section. I think we've talked about that one, and that's not, so I put all these in one folder and called it items to move to the general bylaws.
This in fact came up as a topic when we were doing Medford.
Right.
We had a zoning draft. Somebody said, what does the general ordinance say? We found the general ordinance and now the zoning just says, see the general ordinance.
Right. And the same thing we already talked about and voted curb cuts. So I'm not going to go through that one. A couple came up in our discussion of section 4. So Chris and I propose, this is why I'm taking this before we talk about section 4, that we delete these things that we've talked about from section 4 and then amend the general section something or other of the general bylaws by adding a section that says storage of commercial vehicle materials and vehicles. And then it seems that the general bylaws have an enforcement agent specified. Is that correct, Mark? Is that generally is that always the way that happens? There needs to be an enforcement agent?
The general bylaws can be enforced by the building inspector, or they could also be enforced by the police department.
Okay. Well, anyway, we proposed, so just going on the right is what's in our current section 4. We've talked about these things, and it seemed to us that these are operational things going both forward and backwards.
Mhm.
And so we added a section, propose a general bylaw section instead that said storage of commercial materials and vehicles. the building inspector or whomever shall allow the following, provided they are not visible from the public way and do not create a nuisance. So this is two things. This is removing the requirement, which I know there's disagreement on, but we have talked about this, removing the requirement for for 2 acres and saying so long as they are not visible from the public way and do not create a nuisance. And we added 3 things: the storage of building and landscape materials and equipment. So we combined all of that, landscaper and landscape equipment, commercial landscaping equipment, materials and supplies. And then the garaging of commercial vehicles owned and operated by residents on the premises is limited to 1 commercial vehicle less than 14,000 gross vehicle weight. Recall that only our proposed section 4 has this limit of gross vehicle weight limit. So that, let's just stop there and see. First, do we have agreement that it makes sense for these topics to be covered by general bylaws rather than zoning? And then we can argue the finer points. Laura, go ahead.
My comments related to curb cuts, so I'll hold it till we can get back to
Okay.
that.
Thanks. Is Christine still on? I can't see. No.
Yes, she is.
I was just trying to find yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, good. Thank you. So make sure. So I know that Christine, you felt had a lot of strong feelings about these issues, but we get more applicability if we move them to general bylaws. So does that make sense?
Oh,
Clean up zoning.
no, if I did, I have a concern about the size of the vehicles. I don't know if I have a problem with moving them to the general bylaws.
Okay, the first issue is, so it seems like we have agreement that moving. So it seems like we have agreement that moving this section, these issues to the general bylaw makes sense. The gross, okay, so then let's take them one at a time. The current bylaw, current zoning requires 2 acres and then a special permit on a smaller parcel, in which case it has to stay in zoning if that's the case. And we had quite a lengthy discussion at a prior meeting. So that is a change. This that we've put here, here is a different approach. It says not visible from the street or don't create a nuisance. So it's a bit more subjective, but does not have that 2 acre requirement and the special permit provision. And it also doesn't say whether it is limited, that this could, any particular district. So I guess, Mark, let's get your comments first.
Well, you're importing a zoning official, and the topic is one which would be typically regulated as a use of land under zoning. So you run the risk that a reviewing court, I don't know that this would ever happen, but you run the risk if a reviewing court got involved under the RACO case, RACO versus Board of Appeals of Raynham, that these are typically topics governed by zoning, and that you kind of cheated the zoning gods by moving them over into a general bylaw.
But then if I decide to move a truck into or a landscaping equipment into my yard now, what, I have an existing home, I'm not getting a building permit. How would that be regulated?
I think this one kind of walks the line. There's no, like I said, there's only 2 cases maybe that talk about the fine line between what should be zoning and what should be general bylaw. I think to the extent that you have past transgressors who have never been lawful, this would make them lawful. And it doesn't have grandfathering, which is a good thing. So if anybody ever crossed the line, meaning that they're visible all of a sudden from the public way, you could go after them. So there's advantages both ways. I don't think putting them as a general bylaw would necessarily be unlawful. I think I think home rule is a very powerful tool.
Okay. It's kind of a wishy-washy answer if I ask.
Well, it's a wishy-washy world. That's what I can't tell you there's a bright line. I can tell you can't regulate the number of mobile home parks with a general bylaw, because that's really the only case.
Okay, well, we're not doing that. So let me go back to the board. Do we want to try to keep this in section 4, or do we want to move this to the general bylaws? Given what we just have to make a decision on that one. Laura?
Has this been a problem issue for the town? Is that why this is floating up?
No, it's floating up because we're trying to clean up the zoning bylaws, and it
I
seemed
see.
to Chris and me that it made sense in the general bylaws.
Okay.
I can see we might not have been right on
Yeah.
that. And we couldn't make a decision about it when we last talked about section 4. So we thought this was tidy, but maybe we were wrong.
Sarah, can we take an actual vote on this? It seems like you're
Um,
talking about consensus, but why don't we just make a motion and vote on it? My understanding is it's easier to assess fines for things in the general bylaw. The mechanism wise, it's easier. So I think I support moving these and with the language you've got.
That was my question to Mark. Isn't the enforcement better in the general bylaw than with the planning board as far as enforcement?
I think it's both retrospective and prospective. This is what the court said in the RACO case. And you remember the topic, right? So the court noted that the subject regulated was within the traditional scope of the zoning power. Second, the court pointed out that in Raynham, prior to the enactment of the bylaw, the subject of trailer parks had been a topic regulated by the zoning bylaw. And third, the court argued that if the bylaw was allowed as a general bylaw, the various freeze provisions of the Zoning Act would be circumvented. There are provisions in the Zoning Act that protect your rights to do certain things if you do them in a certain sequence. So that's the guidance we have from the court.
But that's a land, isn't that a very different kind of use?
Yeah, but it's a use of land. I mean, the use of land as a trailer park is fundamentally no different than the storage of building and landscaping materials and equipment.
Well, I think the difference is that the storage of building materials is transient, whereas a mobile park is there for years and years.
Well, the storage of building and landscaping materials would not be protected under zoning if it were transient, because any use not present for 2 years or abandoned is no longer grandfathered.
Okay, Laura?
Like I said, I think the inclusion of these in a general bylaw, while it's an interesting academic discussion, I think it's lawful. So.
Okay. Laura, do you have something else?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the hardware store and if this would, as an example, you can see their building and landscape supplies from the street. I don't think it's bothering anybody. So as long as we can, draw reasonable decisions, if it moves to the general bylaw and somebody doesn't complain about, that's not a transient use, it's there all the time. Just as an example.
Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. I suppose we could exempt hardware stores.
Yeah, then who do you exempt? That's just
Right,
the one that
just-
pops to mind, but certainly visible.
Just put
Okay, that's fine.
put the non-retail storage.
Yeah, non-retail, that'd be good.
That's a good point.
That's a good suggestion.
I still have a problem with the size. We're talking about residential neighborhoods, and 14,000 GVWs is massive. Especially when you're talking about small lots.
So right now but this would actually give the building inspector if it creates a nuisance or a hazard to do something about it, where we don't currently have any size requirements. It's an allowed use now is overnight parking of commercial vehicles owned or operated by residents of the premises unless garaged on the premises. That's what's there now. So this is a lot more stringent. It gives us a gross vehicle weight.
So I
provided
think we
it's not
could make
create or
it
reduce
smaller. I think we can make it in more conforming with residential neighborhoods. This is not a residential vehicle. This is a true commercial vehicle. This means that Black Earth can park in their driveway overnight if someone lived in town, and that is completely foul smelling. I just think we are encouraging more density. I don't think we need to encourage large vehicles of this scale. I think the next class down, class 2, fine. Class 3, which this is it's just too big for residential neighborhoods.
Okay, what changed residential or
I think you should
Non-retail.
probably say in the preamble, not visible from the public way, period. And do not create a nuisance. Nuisance is a tort concept that balances several factors, the reasonableness of the location, the reasonableness of the use. It's tough enough for a judge to do that, let alone a building inspector.
So, and my concern is this is just bottom line safety. I mean, these large vehicles backing out now is going to be allowed into streets that have children riding bikes, walking to school. This vehicle's just too large to be in a residential neighborhood.
okay. So do you have a proposed, do we have a specific
Next
proposal?
class down is class 2, which is 6,000 to 10,000. So less than 10,000.
So
Class 3 is 10,000 to 14,000. I'm A-okay with class 2.
okay.
14,000 is huge.
I think I agree with you on that. Gross vehicle. I'm gonna actually just. Gary, I know you want to stop talking about this. Do we want to take a motion to move these items to the general bylaw and include a limit of 10,000 pounds gross vehicle weight instead of 14,000. Does somebody want to take a motion on that and make a motion that way to move these to general bylaws and with a 10,000
I would also add non-commercial.
of non-commercial? Yeah, I need to fix that wording. I can't quite figure out how to do that right now.
He said non-retail, I think was Mark's words.
In the first bullet, non-retail storage.
Non-retail was the word. And I would
Thank
second
you.
that motion. I would second that motion that you made with that non-retail as a friendly amendment.
Okay, great. I can get rid of that. I'm sorry, did somebody second that?
Ron
I
did.
did.
Oh.
I did.
Who made the motion? I did.
I will say so moved, and then Ron.
Thank you, Veronica, Christina.
I think that non-retail should come before building and landscaping materials. That's what you're qualifying, not that the storage is retail. The materials are retail.
Next line down. Yeah.
Storage of non-retail. Yeah, okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Any other discussion? Do we need to have a roll call on every vote? I guess we do. Ron,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes,
Christina,
Yep, yes.
Laura,
Yes,
Gary,
No,
okay, and I vote yes, so 5-1. Okay, great. The next one on the general bylaws that we did go around about, and we put it in this list just to see, and that Mark, I'll get your opinion first.
excuse me,
about what-
Sarah,
Yeah.
excuse me, did we vote the previous one to that? Didn't you have a section higher up we didn't vote on?
Junk cars.
We did not vote on that?
We had already voted it before.
Okay,
Swimming pools. Chris and I thought maybe swimming pools should be in the general bylaws, but maybe based on what you just said, Mark, I'm not sure we were right. So tell us whether we should have swimming pools in zoning or general bylaws, where they belong.
Well, it's a topic typically regulated by zoning,
Okay,
and you've historically regulated it with zoning. Those are the two main factors. You got a lot of grant building permits and zoning officials, and I'm just reading through it.
I think
You can't have a special permit requirement in a general bylaw.
okay.
E.
Yeah, it stays in zoning.
Okay, so this stays in zoning. I think I agree with you on that. Keep in zoning. I think the content of which we already went through, so I'm not going to spend time on it. We can always come back to it in our hearings. Curb cuts. This we voted a long time ago. I just took out the form, and I don't know why this format looks like this, but this has already been voted by us to change the permit issuing by the Department of Public Works. It was not a unanimous vote, I know that, but we did vote it. Is there any new information on this that, I know Laura, you had a comment. Oh, you're muted.
Thanks. I made a comment in the SharePoint document.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not using the SharePoint one. So
Would you like me just to
apologize.
speak to it, or?
Yeah,
how it's
yeah,
used? Okay.
go ahead and speak to it.
All right. It's similar to the one we were just talking about. Let me just get it up again here.
And the reason I'm not doing that is
Yeah.
because I want to save a separate copy on these things.
Okay, got it. Sorry, I've got too many tabs open here. Okay. The regulation of driveway entrances under C.
Yep.
I was proposing one, that we either strike the driveway be designed to allow vehicles to enter in a forward direction, or qualify it, exempt districts D and G to preserve the closely settled historic character. And second, that's one thing. Second, I was proposing to add a sentence in the next paragraph. There shall normally be not more than one driveway, apron, and curb cut per residential lot. Residential uses are encouraged to utilize only one driveway entrances, with two being the maximum allowable.
I have no problem with either
I
of
have
them.
no problem with those changes. I can pull them up, sorry. I'm gonna have to unshare. Okay, figure out where I'm at.
I have no problem with that, but then when we talked about this before, it was, okay, and then what? When does it get kicked back? And I think that language needs to be clearer. Like that decision shouldn't be, in my opinion, to the DPW. I think it should be one. DPW can make the decision of one. At some point, we needed this checklist that it gets kicked back to the planning board. And that language, to me, doesn't have that clear language.
No, I think we voted to move this to the DPW.
No. Oh, no, absolutely. Yes. But there were.
Yeah,
there
I don't
was-
want it coming back to us. We don't, we're not engineers. We are, we don't want to be dealing with curb cuts.
I
So
think,
it's
Why is the
coming
nobody's-
back
planning
in
board
all-
still playing a role then?
I think there's a point here, which is if a driveway is proposed that does not meet the DPW standards,
Right.
then it comes to the planning board for a special permit, and we get to review it then.
Correct.
So we can't put special permit requirements in the general bylaws.
Well, you're pretty much backdooring it. So again, is this a topic typically regulated by zoning? Yes. Is it something? Well, no, actually, it's not.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. But you've got the planning board involved in a general bylaw by saying that if all fails at the DPW, just go to the planning board.
So
Isn't that
Mark-
what it says?
So Mark,
Yes.
that does exist in something that we already have in our general bylaws. Our earth removal, while in the general bylaws, has a special permit granting authority as the planning board. Likewise, stormwater general bylaw comes back to the planning board in certain instances. Are we on shaky ground there?
Well, you have most towns would send the soil stuff to the soil board. In the southeastern part of the states, many towns have soil boards. And sometimes it's the Board of Selectmen, sometimes it's a separate board. The Board of Selectmen is the road commission. They are the Board of Road Commissioners by statute. So instead of sending it to the planning board on a DPW disagreement, why not send it to the Board of Road Commissioners? Or to the highway
I like that
superintendent.
idea.
The highway superintendent may assume the powers of the Board of Selectmen as road commissioners. So you could send it to the highway superintendent.
What scenario would it be kicked back to the planning board for a special permit? This is a curb cut. What I don't,
Let's say, Ron,
Well, look
let's
at the
say somebody
bylaw.
wanted to put 2 curb cuts in.
well, we're amending, okay.
We're saying no, if you want 2 curb cuts, you gotta get a special permit.
And Mark is suggesting that special permit comes from the road
Board of
commission, which is the Board of Selectmen, unless otherwise determined. And I'm sure that they could say, what do you think, planning board?
Well,
Yeah,
I think the
definitely.
concern was, and why we kicked it back, is because some of these neighborhoods are tight, and now we're taking out neighborhood ability to comment on something and where it goes and so forth. If you have 2, and now you went from being able to comment to not being able to comment. So if the situation is normal procedure, fine, DPW handle it. If it doesn't, I thought we agreed before it was coming back, and it would be a special permit where neighbors would be notified and have a say. Like that was the reasoning.
Yes, that's right. But I think having it reviewed by the Board of Selectmen that's fine. The neighbors would all have a chance to chime in on that as well. Doesn't have to be the planning board.
Okay, so I'm going to interrupt our discussion for 1 second, just 1 second. I'm seeing a bunch of people come. You're welcome, everybody. Our purpose tonight is to review the minutia of a bunch of zoning changes, and we are not talking about the transit-oriented development. In case people are wondering about that, please feel free to stay on. And this is not a public, we're not taking public comment on things unless it's from another board member or Board of Selectmen or something. So just if people are looking for that, I just wanted to clarify because we just got a bunch of people coming in. So welcome. Please stay.
I'm sorry, you might also want to clarify that these are zoning changes for the June town meeting and not the.
Yeah, thank you. Zoning changes proposed for the June town meeting, not for the April 25th town meeting. And the zoning changes drafts will soon be up on our website. So that's why I'm trying to hammer these things through tonight. Okay, so what I'm going to propose for this curb cut is that we take Laura's language. We're going to have to put that we include that, and that we ask maybe to write. We're going to maybe Sue and Chris can write this language about if it's not compliant with the requirements, that it goes to, who do we want it to go back to? Planning board or the Board of Selectmen?
Okay, we can write it up.
I think it should come back to the planning board. If we're going to be talking about special permits with the property anyway, why would we send it to the Board of Selectmen?
I think I tend to agree with you on that.
I don't think it matters. I think we just have to decide.
Yeah,
I think we just send it. We're the ones that have been dealing with it. There's no reason, in my opinion, for the Board of Selectmen to get involved with it.
Okay,
Fair enough.
I agree.
Okay.
Sounds good. Okay, so the next one on special permit. Mark, you mentioned stormwater. We had sort of intended to just keep our stormwater where it is for right now, unless we can there's some changes that the DPW director asked us to make. We would also like to do a much deeper dive on stormwater, that is best management practices and so forth, but probably feel we cannot do that for the June town meeting. If we send you the stormwater, can you just advise us whether it belongs in zoning or in general bylaws? We'll do that after this meeting. Because we made some changes since you've last seen it.
Okay, why don't you send me the redraft and then
Yep. And I
If
think we'll
you-
just take your advice on
All right.
that. But
is it ready to roll as a zoning bylaw if it's going to be included in that? Is it numbered properly and yada, yada?
numbered properly is another matter, but more or less.
Okay.
So since you raised Laura, your hand up on stormwater.
It was just a question for Mark. If you have examples of communities who have done best practices on stormwaters that you could send us for our future effort,
That would be great.
we'd love to have them.
Okay, the one I admired most, although it may be a little dated now, is Dedham, and it's a general bylaw. But
Dedham,
I'll
okay.
look and see if anybody else has a better one.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
great. So Sue, make a note to send it. We'll send that to him. I'd love to get that tighter, but okay. The last one on my general bylaw, I think we've kind of signs is a bigger issue that I think we're not able to, our time is very short for the June town meeting. So I think Mark had mentioned signs as a general bylaw as well, but I think we're going to keep it where it is for right now and not touch it. It's part of that section 6 that is being redrafted, unless somebody wants to take it on. The last one though is the prohibition in section 4 for the storage of recreational vehicles, boats, and trailers in the side yard or rear side yard. And I'm gonna just share the language on that one. That is in section 4. It's a prohibited and this is not in the shared drive. I forgot to put it in, so forgive me. This is in section 4 of zoning, is a prohibited use of the storage of these things in the required side or rear yard. So I personally have 2 comments on this. One is it seems like it's a general bylaw thing. And secondly, I actually think it's worth, I can actually see town meeting getting quite excited about this topic. I could be wrong, because
You're
when you
probably
drive
right.
around town, everybody has a boat
Well,
or a boat trailer in their side yard. I mean, like you could drive from here at my house to downtown and probably see 15. So
why don't you, this reminds me of the ill-fated evening meeting in Swampscott when I added storage of lobster pots to the list. Why not go for broke?
maybe we should just recommend taking it out.
I don't think boats would work.
And so I don't want to just carte blanche take it out without talking to my colleagues here. And my guess is that your opinion about this might depend on whether you have a boat stored in your side yard or whether your neighbor has a boat stored in their side yard.
Well, I don't think it's side yard, it's the setback, right?
Setback.
Yeah, and the setback.
Sarah, I spoke about this with the building inspector and I've opposed this in the past. I think that's too extreme. The setback is 20 or 30 feet in some cases. I think it's excessive. You're not supposed to park within 5 feet of the property line, but as you said, plenty of people work and they store their boats temporarily in their side yards. I've spoken about opposing this in the past. At the most, you should say no closer than 5 feet to the property line.
Or the other thing is just to not worry about it, not to regulate, to remove it from section 4 altogether and be just silent about it, which would be my recommendation, that we just get rid of it altogether. But and then we can always come back in a general bylaw and put it back in. I think we have to be transparent about that we're taking it out because observation indicates that it's a common occurrence. So
It is a common occurrence. I hear people commonly complain about it, that it's encroaching. So I do like the idea of the 5 feet. I think maybe the 20 feet could be excessive. And I'm totally open to exploring it later too. But I like the idea of the 5 feet at least.
I think we can agree on that. 5 feet is within the norms and standards of certainly of the required parking can't be within 5 feet. I think that's a reasonable request.
Yeah, I think it is too. I agree with that, 5 feet.
Okay, done.
Excellent. Oh, sorry, I want to do track changes here.
Do we need to vote on this?
I think I'm hearing consensus. Is there anybody who disagrees with
I
that?
support that.
Thank you.
Support.
Okay. I'm gonna have to wordsmith that's within 5 feet of, okay, great. That's our general bylaws. We're not gonna do signs. Unless somebody really wants to take it on. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing. Let's get to the 2 other things that I wanted with Mark's input tonight. Actually, with all of our input tonight, I think we're getting through this. We made some adjustments to the senior housing bylaw based on last meeting. So Mark, we sent that to you. Did you have any comments on that, or did you?
I don't think I got it.
Oh,
I think I sent Sue an email saying what I had, which was Gary's missive, section 6 and the RCC, but there was apparently an email that went
right, okay, didn't
off
get
to
it.
old address. So
I couldn't get my,
I'll
I
add
couldn't,
that to my list. So
yeah, I couldn't get mine together. I'm sorry. Just brutal here. So,
why don't you put it up on the screen? Because I can.
yeah, I'm
just
trying
go
to
through
do
it
that.
with you.
Sorry.
Yeah, there aren't very many changes to what you proposed for us, Mark.
Okay.
Right. It's pretty easy. Hold on. I don't know why my thing doesn't keep going back to the same folder. I have to keep opening the folder. Let's see, senior housing. Okay. Okay, so this is what we had reviewed last time, and I think we oh, there's another thing. Okay, we proposed, we changed a little bit of the formatting, but that what did we do? We added some design standards.
Okay.
So this is the content that Chris and I, based on our conversation last time, we thought that we're talking about having these, well, we're responding to the criticism that we're hearing from Hamilton, which is this senior housing is being used to build giant luxury kinds of things. And our intent here is to try to be size limited, to try to keep it within some sort of less costly, not big A affordable, but less costly units.
Okay.
So we added in a requirement for no more than 2 bedrooms per living unit. At least 1 bedroom and bathroom should be located on the same floor as the kitchen, living and family room space, and a maximum area should be 1,200 square feet for a 2-bedroom unit, 900 for a 1-bedroom unit, 600 for a studio unit. As
Okay.
the limit.
And this applies to senior facilities that are located in either independent, assisted,
Correct.
long-term care or congregate. Yeah, as
Right,
long
we
as
kept
I wouldn't want to
your
limit.
definition. Mhm.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Yep. So this is what
So-
this is, I think, the only thing we added, I believe.
Yeah.
Sarah, one thing I want to point out, I thought about afterwards, which is the existing senior properties in town are not located on some of them are on the second floor walk-up. In fact, half of them are. So I don't know whether we can say except for existing units
Well,
or
they'd be
for all new
grandfathered.
units.
It'd be grandfathered, yeah.
They're big grandfathered.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that that's going to be the case.
Or unless
Yeah.
serviced by an elevator.
They're not now.
They're not now and they can't be, so.
Right. So that's so I think Chris and I proposed those changes, and that we actually move this to the town meeting, and it's kind of an up or down vote whether people are for it or not.
Do we want to talk about the affordability?
We did
Well,
not
then-
include affordability. In our last discussion, we said, let's not put, in this case, let's not necessarily put an affordability requirement on this, but we certainly could.
I mean, it's actually in the
Not that
purpose, so I
easy.
think to leave it out is a little,
It's not that easy because the affordable computation, once you get into independent assisted and well, certainly long-term care, you have to assign, remember, the rule for affordable is 30% of adjusted income being assigned to shelter costs. So when you've got food services and you've got care services and you've got all that kind of ancillary stuff, it's really hard to come up with a definition of what constitutes an affordable rate. This is the fight that Hingham had many years ago over the permitting of its Erickson facility. They were going to use it to climb the wall of 10% and forever be over the top. DHCD refused to calculate affordability as Hingham proposed. They had a huge fight over it, and everybody's been afraid to do it since then.
So maybe to Christine's point, this word should be less costly.
so Mark, can you take out the congregate and say that the development that's being, proposed in Hamilton doesn't have any services? It's just using this bylaw to build luxury senior housing. So how do we prevent that?
Well, I think if you've got that size limitation and it's understood that this is in one of those 4 types of operations that are in the definition of senior housing, then it doesn't apply to single family McMansions that just happen to have an age restriction attached to them.
Well, Hamilton is just age restricted, that's it.
Yeah, so it's a
And they're
subdivision
going
with
to
an
be
age
from
restriction.
1.2 million.
Yeah, it sounds like Southport, which is Mashpee's 700 unit, age restricted, 55 and older, adult retirement community.
So how do we
That's-
still prevent that?
Well, if somebody wants to build a subdivision and slap an age restriction on it, there's nothing to stop them from doing that. This is not a subdivision. This is an independent living facility, an assisted living facility, a long-term care facility, or a congregate care facility.
Yeah, so I think our senior housing facility definition
Yeah, I was gonna-
prevents the type of housing that's just kind of taken advantage. Is that the way you see it, Mark?
Yeah, I think it has to be one of those 4 types. It can't just be a single family home subdivision on which the developer has put an age restriction.
Do we want to put a limit? Hamilton did that.
For what?
I believe it's like 50 units.
Oh. Southport is 700 units, so I think that's kind of arbitrary. I guess that's my response.
Well, I mean, if we don't put something on it, we don't have any control over it. So
It's
it
special
was just a
permit.
thought.
No,
Hamilton
special
has
permit.
50.
we have complete control. It's a special permit.
Agreed.
I think we say that, but then in reality, we don't really push back much. Hamilton has 50 in it. I think it has something to go by. I just don't think it's a bad idea to put a number on it.
Can you see my screen? Sorry,
Yes.
this is I'm trying to make it.
I don't
bigger.
think we need a number on it, and I agree with Chris. It's a special permit, and we don't ignore our special permit responsibilities in this town. I don't think we need a limit.
I agree.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Okay. So we do define it at those things. So I'd like to I'd like to take a motion that we move this to, oh, Laura, you have one more question?
Something we talked about earlier. So if we get time at the end, I'll mention it. Thank you.
Okay, and can I suggest that we change the word to Christine's point that because of the word affordable in the purpose, that we actually change that to less costly, because affordable is, the word affordable has a meaning. Can
Yeah,
change-
I think that's an appropriate change.
Okay. So with that change in the.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this, senior housing language as amended by Sarah with the less costly phrase.
Okay, so and the idea is we're gonna move this to the public hearing.
I second it.
Great, thank you. Any comments further? Hearing none, Ron,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes,
Christine,
To make sure, this was applicable to every zone, right?
yes,
yes.
You could do this on
Um,
every,
that's a good question. So,
I'm not okay with that.
The
No, I
motion.
may just be no.
let's continue with the motion and then we're
There's a
gonna come
motion.
back to that. Yep.
Yeah.
So you, Christine, how do you vote?
So I'm gonna vote no, because I think it
Okay.
is, and I think that's too much.
Okay. I'm gonna vote yes. So I am gonna allow us, because I think this is an important question that we have not
You
discussed.
didn't ask, you didn't ask.
Oh,
Laura.
sorry, Laura. Sorry,
Yes.
Laura. Okay, great. We have not discussed that, the limited.
So the
commercial-
motion carries.
Yep, thank you. I will ask Christine if you want to move to strike the limited commercial district, just to get that on the table, because I think that's important. We have not discussed that.
Do I want to strike that?
Yeah.
No, I think in our use table, this is applicable to every,
Well, help me out here, Chris. Where do we specify which districts this is it's set in the table of uses, right? She's correct.
Table uses, and it is allowed in every use. This is
In
about
every
building
district.
height.
Okay, so this is about how we regulate it. So then the question about where it's going to be is going to be in our next conversation. Okay, so we'll take that up when we talk about the use table. Right?
Yes.
no, why?
Right,
This-
because that's
this
where it's
section is about
regulated.
Building height, it's not about use.
Correct. This is about once, wherever it is used, this is what the regulations are. So if we take it out of a limited commercial district, then we would want to amend this language. I agree with that. But you're right, Chris, this is done in the use table, not here. I think that's clarified. Okay, so you have your hand up?
Yes, sorry, I just wanted to say that we did have a long discussion when we were first discussing this, and that I'm sure you recall that we wanted it in the limited commercial district as an option. I would hope that you would still be open to that, because there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to choose what we want up there, and I think this is a viable option for that area. So it was intentional. I'm just saying it was intentional to allow it in all districts.
Yes, we're going to come to that discussion next, I think. So what I'm going to jump, let's see, we have Mark for another 10 minutes. And we will have him again. So I do want to get to sections 1 through to section 4 and so because that's pretty nearly done. In residential cluster, we still have a few things to work through, and perhaps we can get Mark's comments on what we send him in advance of the next meeting, rather than try to take that tonight. Is that okay, Chris? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So
Are we going to ADUs next? Because I had some people from our group in attendance because they were anticipating a discussion on it.
we're gonna get it. We're gonna just do an update of ADUs tonight. We're not gonna get too in the weeds. So we're not gonna take that up with Mark here, but so I want to use his time. Sorry, Gary, to the next 10 minutes. and then we'll come to ADUs in a minute. So sorry, I'm sorry for people who are waiting for that topic. So section 4. Without the use table. The table's a separate file. These are the, I did do track changes here. We've left the parking regulations in section 5. These are really just some administrative kinds of things.
Mhm.
And then these are related to, these are now in our use table.
Okay, so if you go back to allowed accessory uses, permitted. So in a couple of recent cases, the court has said, the land court has said, and the appeals court, that you know how the table generally works for principal uses in the following manner. If it's not listed, you can't do it. That's a pretty hard and fast rule. You can, if you scroll up to 4.1, you can see it actually says that, right?
Yes.
Right? Shall be designated. Those uses, generally towns say if it's not listed, you can't do it. That rule applies to principal uses, but it doesn't apply to accessory uses. The court has said it's impossible to envision all customary, incidental, and subordinate uses, and therefore the ones that are listed are fine, but there are others that are not listed that are also permissible. So I just want you to understand that.
Okay. All right, we'll keep that in mind when we look at the table in a minute.
Yeah.
So we have the table. We say in addition to the allowed accessory uses in table, in the table.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to, after these recent cases, you have to kind of caveat around that by saying allowed in the table, comma, or that meet the definition of accessory use as contained in section 12, right? Which is the definition of accessory use. And then you can go on with the sentence.
Okay.
So that would be, or that meet the definition of accessory use in section 12, where you have your cursor.
Actually, section 2.
The definition's moved up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, can you make a note that we need to make sure we have a definition of accessory use? I think we do,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, then just.
But really the only one that now remains is we've taken the storage of building and landscape materials out based on prior discussion.
Yeah.
Oops. That we're deleting that. I'll fix that. And then borders are allowed, and then home occupations and swimming pools will stay here.
Okay.
So that's clarified. I'll fix that.
And it looks like you've taken all the verbiage out of home occupations and just stuck with a basic approach.
Right.
Okay.
While we're waiting, Mark, is there a reason to limit the number of accessory buildings? Is that common?
No, I mean, I think different size accessory buildings typically have different setback requirements. So if the building is under, I think the code used to be 144 feet, then it didn't require a building permit. It could be within 5 feet of the property line, but if it was bigger than that, then it had to observe the setback for a principal structure.
Yeah, we don't have that though, I don't think.
Yeah, one per customer is not, it's not very, I don't see that very often.
Laura, you have your hand up, and I did just change my screen. Can you see the table now?
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
Yes.
No?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
I never-
my question, is this a good time, Sarah?
Yes.
Just wanted to ask it before Mark left, because we just scrolled by it again about the contractor's yard, and I apologize because I know we voted for it, but afterwards I found myself wondering if my neighbor is a plumber or a fisherman and he owns a medium duty truck, have we just made his living illegal if he lives in any of these districts by that vehicle use weight?
I don't think so. I think that's under 10,000 pounds.
Okay.
Let's check that. Maybe ask.
That was all I wanted to say, just unintended consequences there.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, but lastly, the table of uses, again, Mark, we're gonna send this to you. Chris and I contemplated this, the residential cluster. We're trying to think, how do we pass this how do we present this to town meeting? When we
Okay.
have, and it seems like if we have both the senior housing, and this is relevant to senior housing and residential cluster, that the article has to say two things. One is the definition, and two, the amendment of table of uses, table 4.2 or table 1, whatever we're calling it, to include, in this case, this is the table, this as an addition to the use table, because they go hand in hand. One is the regulation of that use and the other is its use. And that those things at town meeting should be taken together rather than separately. Because there's a danger if you regulate it, if you will pass the table and not the regulation, then we're in trouble. Then we're like
Yeah, so
adults.
are you thinking you'll just have an up and down vote on senior and an up and down vote on RCC?
Yes, that they'll be
Okay.
separate.
Actually,
Yeah, you would
actually,
need, you
Sarah,
would need,
we have the RCC now, so.
Oh, right. So that's
So
the
this
senior
could
housing.
stay.
Yeah,
yeah, but
and
it's a different RCC.
Right.
Yeah, it's different, but it exists.
Yeah,
Yeah,
same
I'm
name, okay.
Sorry, I'm
yeah.
looking for it right now. But I think that's the way we have to do it. And so my proposal on this question is, this is where we trying to find where we have senior housing here. Maybe we don't have it in here yet.
Yeah, it should be an A.
Yeah, but we
But
took
it's
it out
not.
because we don't have it regulated yet.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Christine's question about whether it's used across the board. And I'm gonna speak to, before I do that, Mark is about to leave. Do we have, anybody have any other questions for him on any of the zoning changes that we've been talking about for June?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Mark, we
Actually,
will send-
I'm gonna have a quick question,
Oh,
which
yeah.
he's not gonna be able to answer, but just to put on the table, which is the inclusionary zoning. And how, I understand that you can require a certain amount of affordability as part of a special permit process, but you can't do it for properties that can be done by right. So you can't, if you could do a 20-unit subdivision, you can't require some of those units to be affordable. My question is going to be, though, when we do include it in a special permit, and we can't get a free unit for whatever reason, is there some way we can adjust the, I don't know, the affordability, or whether taking cash in lieu of a unit is something we should maybe reconsider after all? Is there some sliding scale that could be applied here?
Well, are you viewing the RCC as your inclusionary measure?
Yes.
Okay, so RCC is a voluntary thing. It's
Right.
not, you can't make somebody do it. And because doing the right thing is rewarded under the statute, the idea is that you can trade increases, you're giving away increases in density or intensity of use. Those are the two items you're trading. And in return, you're getting affordable housing, open space, or other amenities. And you have to specify what the trade is. You can't just leave it open-ended. You have to say, if you know, we'll let you have an increase of 20% in density or intensity of use, or whatever number you pick. If there's a mandatory requirement for somebody to choose this approach, that they have to give you affordable housing, at least in the way I wrote it originally. So I don't recall what it was. I think it was 10% or 15%.
That's right, 10%.
So that takes care of that inclusionary piece. You're choosing both. You're choosing really in order to get the increase in density or intensity of use that we want you to have. You're giving us in return open space and affordable housing.
So if we had a 6-unit cluster, conservation cluster, one of those units has to be affordable, but that would be a burden for the developer unless he had, whereas if he had 12 units, he'd still only be required to provide one.
Yeah, that's kind of in the drafting. So if you put the threshold for giving an affordable housing unit at a larger number, it would eliminate that problem. I don't think I would advise you to do a payment in lieu. It's really hard to know what the payment in lieu is.
Okay,
And I mean, one of the approaches you could take is to say that for the affordable units, the developer will add a unit on instead of subtract a unit out. So if you said any subdivision with more than 8 units will have one affordable, I wouldn't make that 7 and 1. I would make it 8 and 1, and then the lot sizes can be adjusted. That's not as
Okay.
much of a loss to the developer. I mean, a house in Manchester by the Sea is it's $1 million. So if one of the ones I would have gotten anyway, I'm going to have to give away $800,000 of value just to get the benefits of the bylaw, I'm going to tell you the heck with you, and I'm going to just do a conventional subdivision.
right, yeah,
On the other hand, if I get all 8, and now you're just having me build the affordable at cost plus, that's what it is, cost plus. That's
okay,
a better
got it.
deal. That doesn't scare away the developer.
Okay,
Does the-
good, that's
does
very
the-
helpful, thank you.
Does the affordable have to be contiguous to the property?
Does it have to be
Okay.
what?
Contiguous to the
Contiguous.
property?
It has to be
Can
on the
be-
property, yeah.
It can't be elsewhere in town?
Well, you could make that deal. I mean, I think most developers would like to make that deal.
I don't think we should make that deal.
You could, that's
Right,
all I'm
but-
saying.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
I'm just thinking about the guy that has 5 units and he's got to put in a 6th.
Yeah, like
Just
I
that we're
said,
gonna adjust the lot size for them.
yeah, you have to adjust the lot size.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But I feel like what's gonna happen is gonna buy some rinky dinky old apartment and say, here you go, just like what's happened all over town already.
It is special permit though.
Okay,
Okay, I'll work on that. Thank you, Mark, that's very
All
helpful.
right. With
Thank you,
that, I'm
Mark.
off to the Berkshires, so.
okay. We will,
Okay.
Sue will get you some documents or, to
If she
review.
ever comes home, I'll get her in the office.
Okay,
I hope to be home tomorrow. I will make
Okay.
sure that you get all the
Alright.
documents.
okay, I'll
Right.
coordinate with you, Sue.
Discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your good advice. Okay, I just want to close out this discussion about the senior housing. And I wanted to suggest that while a lot of good work was done prior to my joining the board about thinking about senior housing in the LCD, that our work on the LCD for recently has said numerous times, no residential development. This is not a residential development proposal. And so I think we have to be very transparent with the public for June if we're proposing senior housing in the LCD. And we might be strategic to slow that residential that senior housing in the LCD and take that up, kick that can down the road. That's just I haven't quite thought about it yet, but that's just my opinion. We don't have to decide that tonight, but it certainly is worthy of some discussion. Sue, go ahead.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that. I know that what the hopes are currently and the work that we've done to guide that type of development. I think if that development were not on the table, I think we had high support for assisted living and that type. So I don't want us to, I would hate to, because it's a special permit, I would hate to see it us eliminate an opportunity that might be there. So I agree. Let's discuss it further.
My concern is that we have been pretty clear that certainly in April that that we're not, that residential is not part of this proposal, and people get confused. So I think I just don't want to jeopardize the work that we've done on for April.
Yeah, I understand that. I think most people don't see assisted living as a residential use. So I think it's a commercial use, much like a hospital or something. So I think in that context, but yes, let's definitely open and needs further discussion. The other question is, if we, could we create it by an overlay district as we had intended to, even if it was not allowed in the use table currently? I would think an overlay district would change that in the future. So I think, okay. Enough said. Thank you.
Great. And then one last thing on section, all of the sections that we have advanced. So just to be clear, if I look at my list, we have now, oops, that's the wrong thing. Am I sharing? No. I believe that we have sorry, I keep not getting to the right screen. We have voted to advance regulations for adult entertainment. We've talked about the general bylaws, the non-conforming use, the sections 1 through 4, section 6, we're almost there, section 12, and then senior housing, stormwater, ready to go pretty much. I think the only ones left are accessory dwelling unit and finalizing section 6, which I would say is probably puts us in a pretty good place. So what I was going to propose is that Chris and Mary and I Sue print all these things out and then proofread them and be authorized to make any administrative changes, like, making sure the sections line up and that the numbering is right. I think we have to do it around a table with a printout. But Mary is a really careful reader, and I'd like to include her in that. And if that's okay by people, we will take that as one of the next steps when Mary's available. Are there any objections to that as a next step on those measures?
Good.
Chris, you on?
Yeah, man.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, good. We're really making progress here. We wanted to do the update. We'll start with the and I think the only other thing we're going to talk about is the residential cluster. Accessory dwelling units. Gary, can you just give us an update where we are? I think we're not quite ready to review it tonight, but please give us an update.
I wasn't sure of your intent for this meeting. You just the main points that were recommended to modify.
Yeah, do you want me to pull that up?
No, I have it on my screen.
Well, let me pull it up so everybody has it. Hold on.
Well, if you don't want to go through it in detail, maybe you shouldn't pull it up. We'll just talk about some principles.
Okay, go
You want
for
to do it that way? It would make for a shorter meeting if you're not going to want to go through it. We do, most of the changes we made were streamlining the text, and two substantive bigger things. One was the issue that the selectmen raised of amnesty. We talked about it, and I've talked about it with a number of people, there's no real way to parse that out. If you allow, it's a good idea for life safety standards, which is something we should care about. We should want to encourage people to get inspected and have smoke detectors and proper egress. And if you allow anybody to get an amnesty, you pretty much have to allow, if you keep thinking about it, everybody to get an amnesty if they're pre-existing. And it's obviously a topic worth thinking. I mean, if someone's got if someone has a illegal in-law apartment right now and it hasn't offended or hurt anybody very much, then the building inspector was never called and it hasn't had any impact on its neighborhood. So it probably wouldn't make any difference whether it's in a detached structure or whether it's bigger than 900 square feet or what have you. If you require someone to get a special permit, you know very well they're not going to say, hey, I've got something illegal, please give me a special permit. If they're denied, then they've got something illegal and they've exposed themselves. It just won't happen. So it's something to think about. Chris, feel free to weigh in if I'm missing a point on this. And then one other small thing was we had been considering if someone doesn't have a written lease, for example, if your uncle wants to come for a couple of months, would you let him live in your house? Sure, you would. If you had an in-law apartment, sure you would. Do you need to write a lease for 6 months? That doesn't seem reasonable. So this idea of an occupancy agreement, we recommended removing that. Just leases for when you're renting it. Can you use it for family members for shorter terms? We felt sure, just like you might use some rooms in your home. Is there something else big, Chris, that I've left out here?
No, I wasn't part of that meeting, so
Oh, okay.
you might ask somebody.
The number of units.
Oh, right. The number of units we changed and the 2 years. You have 2 years to come forward if you have a pre-existing unit that instead of 1 year, just because nowadays 1 year seems just too short of a time to do anything in the world. And the number of units, again, this is something I think Jeffrey Bodman Turner mentioned at the selectmen's meeting. I'm trying to find.
I found the document.
How many units? Yes, I think we kept it at 20 because I really feel strongly, I don't think I'm alone, that we wanted to see how this unfolds. And we probably won't even get 20 of new units. So it's a reasonable number to start with. We could increase it if we felt like it, but I seriously doubt we would.
Okay, the other question that was raised is, does the provision for ADUs for employees remain? Apparently, many people who are applicants today indicate that they are for on-site employees. And I think the recommendation from the ZBA was to remove that and just treat all ADUs the same, but that was.
Right, they should sign a lease and the unit should be inspected. They can be an employee, doesn't matter who they are.
Okay, and then Gary, you had also said, this is from that issues document that we had at one point, that you wanted to strike the subordinate to the primary dwelling. Personally, I like that language, subordinate to the primary dwelling in its appearance and position. Laura had added that in. I think that
That has no real architectural relevance. There's no such thing as subordinate. But no, subordinate stays in, that it is subordinate to the primary dwelling. What we struck was in appearance and position. That's just odd. I mean, how would an interior unit appear or have a position? This would only be relevant if you're really adding some sort of an addition to accommodate the ADU, which will happen in I think a real minority of cases. It's just not really, it doesn't make much sense to me architecturally, appearance and position.
May I respond?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
My comment was related to a separate ADU in terms of its subordinate appearance and position on the lot.
Oh, if it was a separate
A separate,
building.
Which we
separate
do
building.
not- I want to be clear, we do not recommend allowing detached ADUs other than pre-existing ones, but no new ones for the time being. That should be something to
That'd be a
consider
special
over
permit.
time, but not now.
Okay.
Or it could be on a special permit. You could have a dead end street or something where it's totally innocuous, but yeah. Thank you, Laura.
Mhm.
And other than that, we'll end up reviewing the whole thing if we go any further. So,
Okay, so I think what we need to do is take each of these things one at a time. And address them. So,
do you want to go through this tonight?
no, and I think we're not ready to do that. I think we need to have a draft. Ron, did you have your hand up?
I was wondering, you also changed the square footage, didn't you?
The draft has been there almost a week in the SharePoint. That's what I'm looking at right now. We have a draft with red line markup. We didn't change the 900 square feet.
Oh, it's 900, okay. I
Yeah.
thought that's what you changed.
We went
it
over that
to.
a while ago. The changes
Yeah.
now were reflecting the Board of Selectmen's comments.
Okay,
So we didn't have that on the agenda to actually review the draft tonight, but we can put that on the next meeting. So I think we should all take a look at it. I know I haven't actually looked at it, but I think, thank you for your work on this, Gary. Anything else on ADUs for tonight?
Not for me.
Okay. Residential cluster, Chris, do you want to just, you prepared a memo, you want to just summarize that for us? And then I think we need to take that up at the next, we're getting close to understanding that. We're gonna have to vote it up or down.
So, yeah, so what I did was compare the existing residential cluster that's in our zoning now with what Mark is proposing. You know, frankly, they're from a policy point of view, they're very similar. And I know Mary, for example, worries about increased density and a number of other things. In fact, and the reason I wrote this was sort of a letter to Mary as to why she shouldn't have to worry so much about increased density. And I'm sorry she's not here at this meeting, but I'll reach out to her anyway. What Mark is proposing that's different from what our existing residential cluster is, essentially that we provide bonus density for proposals that provide some kind of amenity to the town, whether it's increased open space or maybe a playground or something that we negotiate with the developer. And in return, he gets up to 20% more units than what he would be allowed to under a traditional subdivision. So if he had, for example, in a residential C district, a 5-acre parcel of land, under the current zoning, he could put in 10 units. If he clustered them in a way that we agreed with, we could actually allow him, and he'd have to go way out of, you know, it'd be a pretty big contribution on his part. He could get 2 more units. So one of the questions is, how much would that affect the overall number of housing units in town? And I did a quick calculation. I think, Ron, at the last meeting, you said that over the past 10 years, maybe there have been 3 residential clusters approved.
Yeah, 3 or 4, there is one.
So at that pace, and if each one were between 10 and 20 units, over the next 10 years, we might see 5 or 6 additional units that we wouldn't have seen under a conventional subdivision. And so that didn't seem like it was going to be a deal breaker for the town, especially if we're getting something like affordability or a more open space or a playground or something out of it. So that's what the memo basically says, and it's much longer than that because it actually has both bylaws in their full glory with highlights in it. So I urge all you to read them and see if you agree. And at the next meeting, we can start hammering out the basics of this thing. And frankly, if we keep the existing residential cluster and don't go to the new one, it's not the end of the world for our zoning recodification. But I think it'd be a good thing to do if we can.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for all your hard work on that. You spent a lot of time on that. Gary?
I would have trouble marking up this document because these are topics I'm not authoritative on. But the board should try to develop some consensus as to how do we feel about affordable housing? As I said at a previous meeting, I don't think anybody, especially after seeing the 40B, has much respect for this 80% AMI. Maybe we could work into this a 60% AMI target number. I don't know how feasible that is. The other thing we could potentially work into it is requiring smaller units. If someone's going to have a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom, maybe we want to specifically target sort of non-family units, but smaller units, two-bedroom. I'm not sure. Did I say 2-family? I meant 2-bedroom units or 1-bedroom that are of a mandated smaller size could affect this missing middle of housing, where there aren't many options at, even just lower market rate isn't so terrible, even market rate. But it would provide a variety in housing types for the town. And the only other issue too on this is that open space. How do you allow public access to it? How does it become really an amenity for the neighborhood other than, I'm not sure the right term, a platonic view of trees? I mean, how do you flush that out? None of these do I know the answers to.
So let me quickly respond, Gary. You have to understand that what we're trying to do is prevent traditional subdivisions, which use up a lot of space and are very inefficient and are kind of a detriment to the town, actually. So we want to reward developers who are willing to cluster, and that's by penalizing them by saying you can only have 2 bedrooms. Then they'll say, well, screw you, I'm gonna build a traditional subdivision. So we want to encourage them.
I'm
So we got to
suggesting
be
an extra
careful in how
unit.
we frame it, I guess is all I'm saying.
Chris, I'm in favor of the extra unit, which is a candy for, what do they call it? Carrot.
Here,
But it's not too much to ask that it be of a diminished size because we have targets and goals. I think people in town could see a benefit if they're going to be allowing greater density, just even though it's clustered, it'll be somewhat more units. There should be some benefit perceived by the town in general. This is something Gloucester, I think, completely missed when they tried to sell their new zoning changes there. There's no direct benefit to anybody by this greater number of total housing units. So let's mold them and shape them, but allow some extra units.
okay, if you're talking about qualifying the density, that, yeah, I think that's something we can talk about.
Christina?
I guess I just want one clarification, Gary. Are you talking about the extra unit being smaller or the whole development being smaller?
I
I
don't
think you're
really
talking
say,
about the,
I don't know the answer. Maybe it's the extra unit plus another unit. I don't know what has been done and tried out statewide. The MAPC might have some, definitely would have some input. Our housing consultant would have some input. I don't know.
So I know the development that's to the left of Grapevine Lane. So if you get off Grapevine, you take a left, that development up there on the left. It's their, $1 million plus residential homes. But from the front, you can't tell, but every 10 units is a 2-family. So from the front, it doesn't look like it. But to me, I think we need to make sure that we're not making these other units stand out like sore thumbs. So that was my concern. So these homes, every 10 units looks like the next door neighbor, but it actually is 2-family, and you enter through the rear, and that's where the front doors or side doors are.
yeah, that's a great point. Great point, Christina. Absolutely.
So, wanted to know, how do we stand on our visuals of what these proposals would look like? I think Sue was going to work on that. So do we have an update on that?
Yeah,
So in the memo, I took some dice and put them on a piece of paper and made lot lines, so you can kind of see what it would do. It's not science, it's just a sketch.
I'm actually looking at your memo, Chris, and I'm thinking, I think your visual got lost in the upload to SharePoint. So I think we need to make it a PDF.
I
Oh,
didn't see
okay.
that.
I
Fair
just
enough.
looked at that, sorry. So we'll put up, he has a great little visual that is very effective.
It's more little than great, just so you know.
Oh, it was like Monopoly pieces. I'll just show you. So we unfortunately, when we put things on SharePoint, sometimes we lose things. That unfortunately got lost in the SharePoint, so we'll make it a PDF. So
Well, I think, Chris, I can't really see that. I said, but what I think we were looking for is like almost best case, worst case. Is that what this does?
says
No,
what
it's just saying what a traditional subdivision would look like versus a clustered.
So let's let's put it up as a PDF so that you can all see it. Sorry, Chris, about that. I didn't
That's all right.
check that PDF.
Chris, we can cluster those clusters better than you clustered them. I think they should
Thank
be.
you.
built.
I'm
sure you
saying,
could.
making the same
I
comment.
know,
Okay.
Let me help
Um,
you, Chris, next time.
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Okay, but it was a good attempt. So to answer your question, Christine, we're working on it. I think we made a lot of progress tonight, actually. The other piece is if we can get, I think we got a bunch of the stuff that can get up on the website. I had originally thought that having line numbers would help us, but the problem is formatting things with line numbers, I think almost is more confusing. So we'll take a stab at that and get some things ready to go. And the last piece, we're not going to talk about flood control tonight. And then in terms of timeline, we need to have a hearing probably. I think Sarah Mellish said they have zoning applicants who are making applications for either special permit or variance have to have their application in by May 16th. So I want to have this hearing. I think we want to have this hearing after that. So like May, which is about a month later than I had said. So that gives us about 2 more weeks before we have to have a public notice. So next week we have a regular planning board meeting, and then we probably have to have one more workshop before we can finalize what we're going to take to town meeting, but we're getting pretty close, so which is good. And I think that's all I have for tonight.
We might be able to take a subject on next week's meeting. Right now, I only see a few items on our agenda, an A&R, the decision on Cornerstone, and some minutes. So if you guys, Sarah, Chris, you guys want to pick a subject, maybe we'll have time to do it. Put it
Okay.
on there.
Excuse me. I thought the Cornerstone decision was due April 25th, not the 11th. Am I wrong about that?
April 25th is town meeting.
Right.
I have the
That's
11th.
right.
So I
We
had the
lose one of our
11th,
meetings.
but, let me
Okay.
double check. Let me double check what I sent to all. Maybe
Okay, because I mean, I
double
have a
check
solid draft, but people need time to look at it, and Chris was
Yeah,
going
that's
to
what
take
I
a
was
look at it for
asking
me.
you.
Yeah, no,
I
I was
sent you,
aiming towards the
I replied
25th.
to your, okay. Let me double check on the dates.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what it is, I guess it depends on how decent a draft I've written. I've never written one before, so
I understood. Let me
Yeah.
just,
it's pretty far along, but I'd like others to look at it.
no, he continued. It's 4/11.
It is, okay. All right.
Continuance where he's expected next week. So Yeah, if you could get it to Chris, I'll take a look.
I'll do
at
that.
it also. Send me a copy. We'll get a draft out for the members to look at. I
Okay,
think it's pretty much, we're pretty much all in agreement on that, so we'll get it out. But
okay,
still see some, I do still see some room on our agenda so far for the
Okay.
11th.
So we'll try to get
So,
some things, at least one or two things that we can kind of wrap up. I think we're getting pretty close on. I think the other question on the residential cluster is whether or not we feel we have the bandwidth. We have to have public hearings on these and then present them at town meetings. So it's the totality of it that's a little daunting. So, I mean, it shouldn't be, because most of the things we're doing are administrative changes, but it's taken us a long time to get clarity, and we've got a few things that we've done here and there to try to improve things. But we're gonna have to work hard to figure out how to present it. Okay, I'm all set tonight. Ron, I'll pass it back to you.
Did you get a response from Alan Wilson on the amount of time we will have on the LCD?
He said typically it's 2 minutes,
Oh,
but he would work with us. So,
okay. All right. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
so
I just
moved.
have a question. When I was reviewing the minutes, did town council opine on the LCD article?
Yes, I believe it was sent out to everybody a while ago. They did,
I missed it. Okay, I just didn't
yeah.
see it.
there were two things. One is, yes, they did. And the
I'll
question
look at it.
the question we asked was, would it affect the matters before the ZBA around SLV? And the answer was no, it would not.
Thank you.
So, so motion to, I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second. Roll call. Ms. Creighton,
Yes.
Mr. Olney,
Yes.
Ms. Delicio,
Yes.
Ms. Tenney,
yes.
and I see Gary's gone. Gary, you there? We're adjourned.
I think he's gone. Okay,
Thank
good
you.
night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.